Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Letson, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Today is Black Friday in America, the official start of the holiday shopping season. Last year, we used this day to talk about the best deal in Magic, Liliana's Demon Contract. And since I hate to see a good theme go to waste, this time we're going to look at the biggest discounts you can get on cards in Standard. Now, to be clear, I'm not talking about sales or promotions on physical cards. No. There are over 30 cards in Standard that have ways to reduce their own casting cost. So we are going to look at those in set order and see what it can tell us about their respective planes. Up first is Throne of Eldraine, which has 9 cards that can reduce their own cost under the right circumstances. Into the Story wants your opponent to have 7 or more cards in their graveyard, and within the set there was minor support for a milling theme, but this card really took off with the arrival of Zendikar Rising and the rogues who wanted to see 8 or more cards in a graveyard. This is what we call a plant card. It was planted in one set, but the payoff for it came in a later one. The game's designers knew that milling strategies would be getting a lot of help in the coming year, but it looks like they used that time to dial in the magic number from 7 to 8. Mystical Dispute, however, needed almost no help from other sets in becoming a key part of blue control decks. The card gets a discount when attempting to counter another blue spell, and that is part of a cycle of 4 cards that offer you a reward when facing off against their own color. Only the blue and green ones come with a discount, though, and that brings us to Oakhome Adversary. Now, since most of the field is blue and black mill decks, you are unlikely to be able to cast this guy at his half-off price. Instead of trying to profit from what your opponent is doing, the 5 legendary artifacts of Eldraine reward you for having your own plan and sticking to it. Ember Cleave has made blocking pretty much impossible for the last year. It gives aggressive red decks the ability to both swarm around and trample over everyone else. The Great Henge is probably the second best out of the cycle. Green decks already run some creatures with high power, making it easier to cast the Henge, and then you can get an immediate refund on some of that mana while gaining life as well. The other 3 legendary artifacts have seen far less play, either because their requirements are more narrow or their payoff just isn't there. While Embercleave is happy to see any attacker, Circle of Loyalty wants you to have knights in play specifically, and its second ability watches for you to cast legendary spells, which pulls your deck in 2 different directions because there's not exactly a ton of legendary knights in the format at the moment. The Cauldron of Eternity probably had the biggest impact on the Eldraine story, curing Garruk of his curse, but none of that power is captured in the card. To earn your discount here, you need to have a graveyard full of creatures, which actually should be pretty easy with all the mill decks you'll face off against. But then, once you get the Cauldron into play, you can't put any more of your own creatures into your graveyard. It only lets you cast them from there. So eventually, you'll run out of resources, and you'll have to get creative with ways to restock your shelves, so to speak. The strangest of the 5, though, is the Magic Mirror, which is the only one to require 3 mana of a specific color. That's probably because they were afraid of making it too easy to add to a red burn deck. Again, thanks to the popularity of mill decks, the mirror should be pretty easy to cast at its discounted rate, but then you'd start to draw through your own deck faster and faster, and you might kill yourself before you can win. So, another self-defeating card, I guess. Last from Eldraine, we have Emry, who gets cheaper to cast for each artifact you control. Now, this feels like it's more to fit the top-down design for a Magic version of the Lady in the Lake, but it also makes her an interesting brawl commander because you can kind of avoid the increasing tax each time you cast her if you've got enough artifacts already in play. So what does all of this tell us about Eldraine? The triggers for the discounts are all over the place. Sometimes they care about a card's color, sometimes a card's type, sometimes it's a creature's power, sometimes it's the number of dead creatures. Eldraine itself is made up of two parts. There's the courts, which are the civilized side of things, with the kingdoms and the knights and whatnot. And then there's the wilds, where you can go on quests to prove your bravery against the unknown. So in a way, you get to go on a quest when you pick cards to build around from this set. Cauldron and Mirror are both pretty cheap right now for being mythic rares, and both offer impressive upsides for the first person to figure out how to make them perform. So, if you join our Patreon, you get access to our exclusive Discord, where you can chat with other story fans about your next deck idea. Anyway, in stark contrast to Eldraine, we next come to Theros, where only 3 cards can reduce their own casting cost. The first is Daybreak Chimera, which follows on a curve right behind Daxos. But without that otherwise perfect start, this guy's liable to be stuck in your hand for quite a while. The other spell from this set that also uses the devotion mechanic as a cost reducer is Drag to the Underworld, but in a format with Bloodchief's Thirst, there's almost no reason to play this. The final Theros card you can snag cheaper than printed is Brine Giant, who taps into the set's other main theme, enchantments. His stats are good, and enchantments tend to stick around for a while, so it shouldn't be that hard to reduce his cost, but he is still just a vanilla body, and at the end of the day, in a format where creatures can affect the battlefield the moment they show up, that's not good enough. I do want to give a quick shout out to Nailia, because she can reduce the cost of all your other creature spells and provides a way to get them into your hand, but she doesn't really fit with what green is doing in Standard at the moment, which is mostly adventures and food decks. I think Theros played it a little more conservatively with the cost reductions. 2 of them are on common cards, which gives us something fun to build around in Pauper, but even the uncommon removal spell was shoved to the sidelines just a few months after being introduced. That's probably because most of the attention was paid to the escape cards, which had their own alternative casting costs. Now, with so many moving parts in the set, I can understand why they would maybe make the devotion and enchantment-based reductions a little bit weaker. Don't ask me to explain Uro, though, because I don't know. Anyway, Iquaria comes next, and it is also light on cards that reduce their own costs, although maybe my whole scale is messed up because we started with Eldraine, and that might go down in history as one of the most pushed sets of all time. Much like Theros, this set has only 3 cards that can reduce their own cost, and this time they're all common. Gust of Wind wants you to control a flying creature, and that gives it some flavor points, which we always like to see here on Magic Arcanum. Of One Mind plays into the set's theme of humans and non-humans working together. This idea is expressed on many cards, but most of them focus on combat rather than more abstract ideas like shared wisdom, as we see here. Finally, we have Tentative Connection, which really captures everything wrong with the Iquaria story, but I cover that in another video. So this time I will just point out how controlling a creature with menace turns this basically into Claim the Firstborn, only without the upper limit on creatures you can target. I find it telling that none of the cards that can have their cost reduced care about the size of your biggest creature, despite existing within what was allegedly the Giant Monsters Matter set. Head designer Mark Rosewater loves to talk about the importance of having your theme in your commons and your commons be on theme. Now, does Iquaria really do that? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Core Set 2021 gave us 5 cards that can reduce their own cost, but their distribution is surprising, at least to me. 1 is a mythic, and that's Discontinuity, which is cheaper to cast on your own turn. Messing with the flow of time is Teferi's thing, and since he was the face of this set, having a card that lets you suddenly end the turn is a fantastic flavor fit. Then we've got 3 rares. Stormwing Entity looks for an instant or sorcery to be cast to get your discount, and this elemental seems perfect for a blue and red deck loaded with cheap prowess enablers. Chandra's Incinerator wants to see you deal non-combat damage to your opponent, which to me feels like a win more kind of card. If you were already able to pile on 4 or 5 points of damage without attacking, do you really need a 6/6 with trample for 75% off too? Got a note on the script here from Nicole. It says, "That's why it's called a fire sale, Ryan." Anyway, the last rare is Volcanic Salvo, which looks at the total power of creatures you control. And I have to wonder if this was in the design file for Iquaria at one point before getting pushed back to the core set. So that leaves us with the set's only reducible common, Sanguine Indulgence. Now, M21 had a gain 3 life in a turn matters theme supported by several other cards, and this one did some work in draft, but I haven't seen it turn up yet in constructed. Now, I said earlier that the distribution of these cards was surprising to me, and that's because most of them are at rare or above. And I feel that this type of card really should be at common or uncommon to serve as a sort of signpost for new players and to give them something to kind of build their first deck around. Theros and even Iquaria did this better than the core set, which is weird because that's the one that's usually pitched as the best starting point for newer players. Finally, we come to Zendikar Rising, where you can find even more discounted spells than we had on Eldraine, assuming you've assembled your party right. Cards like Spoils of Adventure and Coveted Prize cost 1 less to cast for each member of your party, which encourages you to build a deck with a diverse mix of creatures. Thwart the Grave can bring back your dead party members, and Tazri can find them hiding within your next 6 cards. And yet, even with help from Veteran Adventurer, party decks are not showing up at the high ranks of standard play. Now, this might change in the coming year. Kaldheim could offer some new warriors, Strixhaven might bring new wizards, and the Dungeons & Dragons set could offer a little bit of everything. There's also Lullmage's Domination, which can reduce its cost if you've been sending enough of your opponent's cards to their graveyard. They don't even have to touch the battlefield first, if you know what I mean. And I'll give a shout out to Kaza, why not? Because she can reduce the cost of an instant or sorcery spell each turn, although I haven't seen a deck really take advantage of her yet either. So where does that leave us? Well, most of the cards in Zendikar Rising that can have their cost reduced are connected to the party mechanic, which gives us a clear incentive for building our decks. It also serves as a plant because most of these cards will get better in the future as more rogues and wizards and clerics and warriors are added to the format. It also captures the theme of the set. Zendikar is healing. The people are coming back together and rebuilding. They are starting to explore the sky claves and finding other treasures revealed by the royal of the plane. All of this is reflected in the party mechanic. Using your party to reduce a spell's cost reinforces the idea that by working together, things get easier for everyone. From quest-worthy legendary artifacts all the way to a fellowship fit for magic, we have seen a lot of crazy ways to reduce casting costs this year. That leaves you with some fantastic deals in Standard. Which one is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. Happy Black Friday. We'll see ya.